Ladies and gentlemen, I've wanted to talk about this Xbox thing, and I started to watch this video by Alana Pierce. I believe she did or does work for Sony Santa Monica, but she has a pretty interesting take on the Xbox controversy, the layoffs that have been going on there, and the shutting down of studios, and oddly, studios that make really good games. And I wanted to take a look at her video, kind of react to it, give you my opinion on it. And it does directly have to do with Call of Duty and what could or is potentially happening there. So let's just dive into it.
In case you somehow missed this news, Microsoft/Xbox shut down 4 game studios this week, including Tango Gameworks, who most recently made Hi-Fi Rush, which, in my opinion,
Indie games, but really, really good indie games. If you haven't played Hi-Fi Rush, it is really, really good. And that's essentially all you need to know about that one.
Is the most underrated game of last year. That game is incredible. And Arcane Austin, who are known for making also a bunch of incredible games, obviously a blunder with Redfall, which was their most recent release, but they all.
So the thing with Redfall is it really did bad. People hated that game and it's their most recent game, but they have a previous history of really, really good games. And I believe they worked under Bethesda, but they got shut down as well. And it leads a precedent if your studio puts out one bad game, which rumors behind it was that Xbox knew they were going to put out a bad game, but wanted to put it out anyway, your studio could be completely shut down. So a bad precedent to
also
set.
made Prey. That game is so good. And
Prey
have worked
being an
on
example of a good
Dishonored.
game.
Feels weird to say because it's only 2 games for whatever reason, but probably one of my favorite game franchises ever. They also shut down an extra 2 studios that I'm not as familiar with. One of them is AlphaDog Games, the maker of mobile game Mighty Doom, and Roundhouse Studios, which is being absorbed by the Elder Scrolls Online developers ZeniMax Online Studios.
So that last one's just being absorbed. I don't know anything about those studios, so I can't really
Bunch of extra
comment
context
on
here
it.
that's important before I get into the things that I feel like I want to say today. Today I wanted to go out of my way to explain some things that I think that maybe gamers haven't realized yet, that the industry knows, but gamers haven't realized yet. But I'll give you a little context first. So the article goes on to say Microsoft currently valued at over $3 trillion. I can't even fathom that amount of money. The way that I ever try to picture amounts of money that are unfathomable to me is
so what she's referring to there is in the article that she is referring to, Microsoft is worth $3 trillion, an absurd amount of money. And we know that they recently bought Activision Blizzard. I don't even remember what it was for. Let's say 80 billion. It was something like that. That's just a portion of what they're worth. But for investors, they need to make back that money. So we'll get more into that soon.
If you pictured each of those dollars as people in a large room, how big is the room? 3 trillion? I'd have no concept of how
it's more than 4, I can tell you that.
That's too big.
The
number's too
literally
large.
4,
They
not
did
4
not
trillion.
say how many staff will lose their jobs, but significant layoffs are inevitable. IGN has asked Bethesda for comment. Microsoft declined to expand further when contacted by IGN. But yeah, obviously everybody seemingly at Arcane Austin and Tango has lost their jobs. Some of those people, I believe, were folded into other developers, and some people in the actual corporate side at Bethesda were also laid off. Of course,
another thing you have to understand is that the people behind Hi-Fi Rush literally have been making amazing games. It's not like they made Redfall and then they're getting canned for it. They made Hi-Fi Rush and other games that Xbox was putting on a pedestal as, okay, this is what we're doing. We're putting out these games and they're amazing, and then just canned them. So even I believe the developers have come out. I don't know if she's going to get into this, but the developers have come out and been like, we did our best and it sucks to see it end this way.
This goes without saying. This absolutely sucks. It sucks. This one is especially devastating to me because I kind of thought that we were through it. Felt like we hadn't had layoffs in a minute.
Like what, 3 weeks?
GDC speech. I wrote this very spicy speech for this year's Game Developers Conference, basically just calling out the industry for doing this. And at GDC, I feel like things felt a little more positive. Like it really did feel to me like people thought we were through the worst of it. So I did not expect this, and it sucks. And it sounds like from some of the reports that have come out afterwards, this might not be it. There might be more layoffs coming in 2024, which is unfathomable.
There absolutely will. And let me explain why. I've talked about this before on stream, if you've caught it, but what has happened with the gaming industry is that during COVID, the gaming industry blew up. My YouTube channel blew up. A bunch of things blew up. Everyone was stuck at home. They had nothing to do. Video games gave them something to do. So all of these games are having additional people on them. This is not just happening with video games, but also other tech sectors as well. I believe people are going through it with social media websites and even just smaller tech things. And because they hired so many people to kind of go into this during COVID, Now that COVID's not happening, there's less money. Not to say that these companies are losing money, because most video game companies are making a lot of money, but the investors are like, hey, you promised me this booming return because we hired all these people. And now that they're not getting that, now that COVID's not happening, now that everyone's doing other things like going and touching grass, all of a sudden the profits are down a little bit. And because of that, they're trying to make up for it by firing all of those people, or a percentage of them, or more than them, that they hired during COVID. At least that's what I see happening. Maybe that's not what people are saying, but that's what I see. So yeah, let's get back to the video. So
because we've already had so many layoffs, one of the worst years in the history of the games industry. And before you tell me it's happening to other industries as well, I know that whenever I talk about this, people go, this is every industry. Said that. I get that, but I talk about video games here. I work in the games industry. Like, it's like, I'm not saying other industries don't also have layoffs. Like, what? Shut up.
She never said that.
Yeah, Arcane Studios had to post it. It's just, it's super devastating.
Was she telling me to shut up? Now I'm confused.
For everybody, obviously the people affected the worst are the people who've lost their jobs. But what also gets me about this one is, if you're going to shut down a studio like Tango,
this is what I was just saying.
Hi-Fi Rush, which, according to posts from leadership at Xbox, was a success.
That's what I was just saying.
Very well. That's now out on multiple platforms. If these two aren't safe with a $3 trillion company backing them, nobody is safe. Nobody in the games industry is safe. No studio you love is safe. Everyone is at risk of being shut down. And that should terrify you. It terrifies me, not just as somebody who works in the games industry, but as somebody who loves a lot of these game studios. Like, this is just so fucking sad. But here's what I wanted to talk about.
It is. But I think what we're seeing come out of this, and I could be wrong, is we are seeing a lot of more independent developers who, maybe are only making games on PC, but we're seeing a lot more of that happening this year. All of the games that have been super successful this year have been games that aren't backed by these big companies. At least that's what I have seen.
Why this is happening and why it's only going to get worse. And there's one real big point of this that I want to discuss. I guess two. Hey, maybe even three. Who knows? So
maybe
many
four.
Things to say. Mostly, wow, is this fucking depressing. So the first thing, you will occasionally see a response of, if they just make good games, this won't happen. Should have just made a good game then. That's what happens when you make Redfall.
Yeah, if it was just going to be that, also great face there. But if it was just going to be that, people would have said that 100%. It's Redfall's fault because people were mad at that game. But here we are.
Just made a good fucking video game if you didn't want to get shut down. The quality of the video game is irrelevant. The quality of the video game is irrelevant.
That's not true.
The quality of the game is not relevant.
So then we're just going to have like Xbox and PlayStation backing a bunch of really horrible games that are just pay to win and stuff. And no, the quality is relevant.
And that is a thing that I think, like, gamers, people who enjoy video games, myself as a video game
I'm curious where she goes with it.
A lot more
Maybe you should prove me wrong.
They are. It is time to talk about Factor, which is a meal delivery service that I've been using for well over a year now. I started using it when I started boxing, and it made my...
I'm going to skip this, but I was also sponsored by Factor. They are indeed amazing.
This is from March 5th. I'm sourcing Gamerant here, and it says, Warner Bros. Want to focus on live service games instead of one-and-done titles like Hogwarts Legacy. This came right after the failure of Suicide Squad and the tremendous success of Hogwarts.
So Hogwarts Legacy was super successful, and it was like a game that you could like literally just sit down and play through the campaign. Suicide Squad comes out. It's a live service game. Everyone doesn't like it. And then Warner Bros. Goes, yeah, we want that one. Theirs is better. And everyone's like, what?
Hogwarts Legacy. And yet they are still choosing to go live service games instead of one and done titles that were...
It's because there's lots of money potentially in live service games. If the game does well, it'll make more money because they can add microtransactions.
Very commercially successful. This is the reason quality doesn't matter, good doesn't matter. Why are they doing this? Why are they making live service games when...
She's saying that quality doesn't matter, but how is Suicide Squad doing now?
They just had a huge flop when Redfall just flopped. Why is there this focus on this thing that is clearly not working when you could instead make something like Hogwarts Legacy, which is a huge IP
because it's a good game.
Fans enjoyed. The answer is the reality of the industry that we're in right now, and why I think things are going to get so much worse for gamers. Every single AAA game right now is a risk. Making any game that is that expensive to make is a risk. Making a Hogwarts Legacy huge risk. The reality of going live service, which I'm sure we're going to see so much of, instead of going for more games like Hogwarts Legacy, which again, you would consider a success, is that
before she says this, I'm going to say what I think she's going to say. I think she's going to say that there's a huge risk with making these AAA games. They cost a lot of money, and sometimes, like for Hogwarts, they have to pay people to get the rights to that IP. When you're spending that much money, you need to make that much money. And an easy way to do that is make it a live service game, because generally speaking, if the game is decent, they're going to make more money. So that's why you see the AAA games going in that direction, and we see the non-AAA, the indie games, not going that direction, and those are the ones being successful.
Is that it is less risky for it to fail. Hey there, Game of Future Alana here. I feel like I could have phrased this a little more succinctly. Both sides are risks. It's just that one risk has potentially like exponential gain. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's risky to make a AAA game live service or single player. Both are hugely risky. It's just that the risk has more of a chance of paying off with like an infinite amount of money if you go live service. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Arcane
that makes sense.
could have made Dishonored 3 and it could have gotten 10 out of 10s and players could have loved it. But if it didn't make an unfathomable amount of money, and that's the reality that we're in, it's like just profit isn't enough. It has to be year over year profit. These companies have to make more money than they did last year because of capitalism. So just being successful.
When in reality, you should look at Xbox and be like, okay, they have all of these studios. They should be able to make the said amount of money with releases time after time because they have so many studios. But it's those live service games like Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever that are making that huge chunk of money.
Successful is not enough. So any AAA game that you make that does not have a live service component, that doesn't have built-in battle passes, doesn't have built-in microtransactions, doesn't have an option for a bunch of players who act like whales to spend a whole lot of money and continually support that ecosystem, is a huge, huge risk. And it is a better financial bet from these companies that are businesses and see themselves as businesses at this point. They don't see themselves as creative outlets. They don't see themselves as art.
That's not going to change.
The publishers don't. You can have a studio make a really good game that is a one and done title like a Hogwarts Legacy that people really, really like, but it's still a random risk of if it will take off or if people will play it or if
and like she said, that's a risk with a game that's not live service as well.
From a business standpoint, to attempt a live service game, which may be cheaper in some ways, might not be in other ways, and to potentially have it blow up and get huge and make a bunch of money from a recurring and dedicated player base, than it is to take the trip.
Put it this way. If say Xbox releases 5 games one year and one of them is good and 4 of them are bad, the one game is going to sell a lot and it's going to make a lot of money. But if they do the same thing and every single game is a live service game and 4 are flops and 1 does well, that one that does well is going to make exponentially more money than a normal game that's not a live service game. That is that one that does well. So even if they put out 100 stinkers and 1 does well, they're going to make so much more money off of that one that does well than all of those stinkers. And even if they made 50 good ones, that one live service one could still make more money than those 50, is essentially what she's saying here.
A single player risk. There's no amount of quality guarantees income to the level of income that they have come to expect. The live service game could fail, but it failing is still
my OBS crashed. So where were we? Let's go back a few seconds.
Income to the level of income that they have come to expect. The live service game could fail, but it failing is still a better risk to take than making a AAA single player one and done experience at this point. The quality of the games doesn't matter. Anyone can get laid off and shut down.
The quality matters where you need that one game to succeed still. So yes, it still matters. I do see what she's saying, though.
Except for a studio that's making a live service game that is continuously getting profit. Now, we're also in a unique landscape right now that I think has just caught up to these executives. I touched on this on a stream the other night, but what you're currently in is a time war. This is a very new thing.
Yes.
I think COVID really
I know where
she's
going.
Overdrive.
Yes, she's
this
right.
This isn't a games industry thing.
Where she's going with this is all these games are fighting for your time. All of these live service games take a lot of your time, and the game that is going to make the most money is the one that you play the most. Therefore, they are not fighting for a good game. They are fighting for your time.
Entertainment in general thing where they are all warring for your time. Your Xbox is also competing against your Netflix, is competing against your Twitter.
Actually, didn't think about it that way, but she's right.
for the most amount of time they can get from you. And every single one of these entertainment services is designed to get as much time from you as possible, to prevent you from clicking away, to make sure that once you engage, you stay engaged.
Yep.
And that is very
That's
difficult
engagement-based
for a game that ends
matchmaking in Call
20
of Duty
hours.
even.
It is really hard for them to keep you coming back to that same service repeatedly, day after day, when you have spare time. They want you to be opening up your Xbox and looking at the Microsoft Store, seeing things advertised to you, or potentially spending money on microtransactions instead of spending time on Instagram or TikTok. You are in an enormous time war where the most valuable currency that you as a consumer have is your time, and you are competing against multi-trillion-dollar corporations. What does it mean? For your time. They are doing everything they can, throwing every resource at you that they can to consume every second that you have. It sucks.
Correct.
Like, I don't think this is fixable. I think that this is like just, and yeah, the appeal of live service spans a lot of facets of the games industry, but it's really that it can steal all of your time all the time. It can compete with a TikTok. They can do something to get you to spend all of your time on it, and thus potentially
I never
increase
thought
the
of it
amount
against
times you will
other
spend money on
entities
that.
other than
Making
video
a good game
games,
is irrelevant.
but
Making
she's
a
right.
great story that you can play for 15 hours is irrelevant. They want as much of your time as possible. Think about what you do with your time. So a couple of other facets of this that I want to touch on.
And I think that might be why other games that aren't just complete time dumps may be doing well, is because people are like, I have all my time tied up in this. If I can just hop into a game and play for 10 hours and enjoy it, it's worth it.
This is a very doom and gloom video. I know it is. I'm just really sad. Like, I feel like I'm watching an industry that I love die. Single player games are not dying. Like, it's not happening 100% across the board. There's still a lot of value for those, for certain companies. Like, not all of them are going to die, and that's a thing everyone's been saying for a long time. But obviously, there is an overwhelming shift in that direction. Okay, so like, I'm not saying they're all gone. It's just a WB, a third-party publisher especially, you're probably going to see more of them make the changes that they've just said that they're going to make. That's it. Because it's less financially risky. So the second part, I see a lot of people say, time for indies to rise up. The indie space has got it.
That's already happening.
Indies are going to kill it. Let's keep playing indies. They're the creative ones anyway.
She gonna
I have
disagree?
terrible news for you, my friend. Things are just as bad in the indie space. Indie
Is it?
studios shut down all the
yeah.
time. You just
Okay.
don't hear about them because you haven't heard of them. It makes news headlines when Arcane shuts down.
Yeah.
It doesn't make news headlines when the indie studios
publicly
you haven't heard
traded
of shuts down.
companies-
Facet of the industry is no less
Or
volatile than AAA is right now. They're in the same place. In fact, it's really hard for indies to get publishers right now. It's very difficult for indie games to get funded right now. The indie space being some haven where this
We still do see like independent developers come out and release like even single developer games. So it happens, but I get
is
where
not
she's
happening
going.
and they can be creatively expressive. Not true, unfortunately. A lot of indies are falling right now as well, and are going to continue to fall right now as well. There are some AAA game devs who've like been talking about leaving AAA and going to indie to save this, and every time that I see that, I'm like, dude, please talk to people who actually work in the indie space before you like jump ship and leave AAA to go straight to indie. Because while they will fight harder to keep everybody, like, indies have a lot less people, so the individual people are more valuable, paid less, but more valuable usually. They're less likely to lay people off because they're more likely to shutter the whole project. Indie is no more safe. Indie is absolutely no more safe right now. The third point
She would know more than I would,
to the
but-
response of, what about Baldur's Gate 3? People will say, what about a Baldur's Gate 3? What
about
about
it?
Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? These are certainly still games that are going to come
I
out
see.
and will still exist, and studios
She's saying that like, okay, like AAA games are all crap, but these good games are coming out. Yeah, there's always going to be good games. Just like when we have a bunch of crappy movies that come out on Netflix, every once in a while you're going to hit a home
studios
run.
that have huge legacies. A FromSoft can get away with this. A Larian can get away with this. A Nintendo can get away with this. They have huge legacies, big IP, and very focused leadership that is almost fighting against the climate. Those games are still going to exist, but they are exceptions. And so what I'm saying is the only way to get a Baldur's Gate 3 or an Elden Ring is to be a studio with a huge legacy, with a very experienced, knowledgeable team, and usually an IP, usually. Because for vast majority of studios who tried to do what Alarian
Like
did with
new
Baldur's Gate 3,
IPs,
it's
she's
going
saying
to
aren't
shut the
going to
studio.
work.
It's not going to work. That risk is too high. They are going to fail, and they are
Especially when a lot of games take like 10 years to develop that are that
going
big.
to shut down. And Sven, the head of Larian, has said so many wonderful things. His GDC acceptance speeches, his Game Awards acceptance speeches, where he's just calling out the industry for being greedy and for not having to do what they're doing. He's 100% right. Like, the industry is choosing to shut these studios down. They're lying to you when they're saying it's a necessity. It's a choice. It's a choice because the profits are not high enough. The area where it is a necessity is the
What the CEOs and top people are saying is if they don't do it, they're going to get fired, and then someone else is going to get paid a few $1 million to do it themselves. So is it a necessity? No, technically not, But for the people who want to keep their jobs in the higher positions, it is. And there's always going to be someone to take that position.
That they just answer to the stock market. It's not like it's a group of people in a room sitting there and being individually evil and saying, let's fucking tank the whole games industry, live service, let's get as much money as possible. Like, it'd be way easier if that was true. But really, it's just a bunch of people whose job...
I hope and I wish she gives a way to fix this. I don't think she will, because I don't see a way to fix this. Money talks.
Jobs it is to appeal to shareholders, to appeal to the stock market, just doing that, because their whole job is to make sure arrow go up. And like, even if one of those executives were to look at a Baldur's Gate 3 and be like, huh, that did really well, let's try and do that. The next executive next to them would slap them, because any live service game that is successful is infinitely more successful. It's so much more successful than a Baldur's Gate 3. It makes so much more money that why would you make even the single player experience that was expensive when you could make the live service game that's expensive that has more potential gain?
Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry about this video. So what do you do?
Oh.
What do you do? The only thing I think you can do is buy games you like. Think about what you put your time towards.
I was hoping she had
and
more
buy
than that.
games you like. Yeah.
I don't have more than
I
that
don't
though.
have a lot
So
of positive shit to say for you. It's bad. The things don't make enough money and the risks are too big. That's my nice uplifting video for today, you guys.
I appreciate the video. What I will say here is I don't see a fix for this. Things are going to keep going in this direction. And what she said, I think that is most important there, is that these things, these games, and even other things, I didn't think of that before, but Netflix, everything else is fighting for your time. So spend your time doing what you enjoy. And if that so happens to be a live service game, give her. If it's not, if there is a game that comes out that is like an amazing single player game, spend your money, spend your time. And yeah, I don't see a way around this or fixing this. If someone's going to create something that takes up a bunch of your time and you really enjoy it, don't not do that because people are saying it's bad, but do what you enjoy. That's really it. I don't know. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments. But if you enjoy these kind of reaction videos, hit that like button, subscribe, all of that kind of jazz. And until next time.